All right, everybody. So um let's ooh, can you turn off your lights?
I think mine is off.
Oh, all right.
Wait, one more.
Um, okay, so let's talk about first of all, last week. So I went through everybody's topics, and if you were able to Zoom with me either during class or be present, or some of you met with me during office hours, or I made an appointment time with you, and we processed your topics together. And hopefully that helped. If you were not able to meet with me, I gave you comments in your feedback. Uh, and everybody who submitted a topic got full credit, and I gave you comments, and I even put in some links for further research that might help you. Um, a couple people still need to hand in a topic. Please get that in because we're going to start writing the lit review this week. And this is the biggest part of your overall assignment for the semester, the lit review, and which in one sense is difficult in the middle of the semester, but in a better sense, which is the way reason we do it this way, you will have the project with the most amount of writing done in the middle of the semester rather than at the end of the semester. Because I know you have other classes. And so hopefully that will help you. You'll still have some assignments to finish up at the end of this semester, but it's a short semester. And I'm hoping getting most of this project done in the middle will help you. Um, It'll also give you time to fix it and rewrite it if you need to, and resubmit it. So everybody will get full credit. That's the goal. Um, so if you need to edit it or make changes, you'll have time to do that. So, but let's talk. Uh, First of all, um, last week everybody handed in their topics. I read them all. I made comments. Are there any questions regarding those comments or the topic I recommended? If you gave me choices, I told you why I made that recommendation. But any questions or comments about topics? All right, good. Um, and so this week, um, the article and references were due. And remember, you know, um, the references aren't, this is not the end of your references. If I changed the topic or made some recommendations, or maybe you weren't even done doing your research, you know. So you can add to your references, you can subtract if you read one of those references and don't like them. Um, so yeah, your references can be changed. The whole goal of handing in 12 references now is basically to get you all started doing that research so you're not waiting till the last minute. And I just found that the only way to do that is to give you an assignment to hand in some references. That'll get you start looking and start reading and finding some of the research you're going to need. Um, I think usually based on my other previous classes, uh, usually if there are any comments that I make, it usually has to do with getting a variety of theories in your references and research. Getting enough theories that you could create your own comprehensive model. Some people just focus on one or two theories with all of their references, and you should have at least three. So that's usually if I make comments that are asking for some changes, that's usually what it is. Um, but yeah, I'll look through all your references this week and make some recommendations. and I'll read the articles and give you your critiques and give you some feedback. So yeah, they should be done by next Wednesday. And but any questions, comments, or problems with these two assignments that you wanted to ask or talk about? The article critique or the references? Did anybody have any trouble finding references that you think will work? All right, everybody's quiet tonight. Maybe that's a good sign. You're all on the ball. If you did not hand in the topic, the article critique, or the 12 references, get them in by this weekend at the latest, okay? So I can grade them and you'll have time to start writing your lit review. All right, next point of order. After watching the lectures last week, any questions or comments, or anybody confused about anything with the lectures on the book chapters from this past week? We can talk about that. I can answer any questions. Okay, this week, I think it's probably the lecture that most people don't like. It's basic statistics. Um, but you know, it's part of your comps and your NCE, and you don't have to do real statistics for this class. But the way I went about talking about the stats chapter in the lecture is I thought about what questions they were going to ask in the comps and the NCE and how they would ask that. And I talked about how to answer those questions, how to figure out the stat answer. So I go over things like standard deviation. How do you remember standard deviation and figure that out for a quick multiple choice exam question? How do you turn a z-score into a t-score or a t-score into a z-score? And you might not even know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter. I gave you a quick little formula for that. So I tried to give you a lot of helpful hints on how to quickly figure out these answers, come close to what might appear in a multiple choice question on those exams, while also explaining what these things are used for. Let's see. I'm just thinking what else I had to say about the lectures. There's also a lecture on qualitative, quantitative, things like that, which you'll use for the paper. And whenever I give a lecture on these things from the book, I do apply it to our project, so you'll understand the application of these terms for your project. All right. So that's the lectures from this week. And I also, hey, all of this is in the notes I gave you that you could use as a study guide if you download those notes that I gave you. It's the same, it's my notes that I use for the NCE to study and you know, for the comps as well. So you've got it for your own study guide. All right. So I want to look at our syllabus and talk about where we are. So we'll just open up the syllabus here. And I do give the dates under the weeks, even though we start on a Thursday because of the class. So right now, 5/29, week 3, Thursday. And so hopefully you're handing in your article review and or article critique, whichever you want to call it, and your 12 references. All right. So if we look ahead, all right. So next week, week 4, and I've got lectures on all this. Nothing's due next week because we're going to get you started writing the lit review. And that's going to take a few weeks to write that because that's the largest part of your project. So nothing due next week, next Thursday, but on 6/12 in 2 weeks, which is really not long to write a lit review. And I'm sorry about that, but there's nothing I can do about it. Um, so in 2 weeks on yeah, 6/12 Thursday, that's when your lit review is due. And we'll start at like we'll have a little review like this and whatever lecture I want to give live, but we'll also start editing them together in class. So if you want us to edit your lit review with you and you're able to come to class, we'll do it together. Okay? And we'll help each other edit your lit review because I believe talking about your lit review together, editing it together, it's not only the person who wrote it that learns from that, but it's everybody who helps edit it also learns from it. You learn from helping each other. And it also says acronyms, and we'll talk about that next week. It's mainly coming up with kind of a cool acronym for your model. And that's kind of fun, really. Um, the and we will edit your lit review for 2 weeks. And if you can't come to class, that's fine. If you can't be here Thursday at 5, that's fine. You can just come during my office hours or email me and make an appointment and I'll edit it with you. Okay. It's easier if we edit it together because I can talk you through it. It's a lot, I can give you much more of an explanation verbally than I can write in the feedback with your grade. So it's just better if I can talk with you and if you have the time to meet with me at some point for your lit review. But believe it or not, while we edit those in 2 weeks, we'll already be at week 6 when we're done editing your lit review. And we'll only have one more week of class when you'll hand in your final projects. So the summer semester goes really fast when you got these projects going on. All right, so that's kind of the timetable. And we'll talk about those other projects later. But right now, I just want to talk a little about the lit review. So if we go to the content again, the first thing I want to tell you about is that's the article critique sample that you could look at for this week's project. And then right here, we have Jen's final paper. And of course, the final paper includes a lit review, okay? So what you're going to be doing is here's a sample of her whole paper. You're not going to do the whole paper right now. You're just going to do the lit review up to the lit review. So here we have the running head and the page number and the APA style title page, which you'll do for the lit review. And we'll have the abstract, which you'll do for the lit review, and that's on page 2. You can add keywords if you want. It's up to you. It's kind of like when you think about keywords, those are the words people type in to do a library search. So it's like, what words would they type in to most easily find your paper if it were published as an article? And then on page 3, we have the introduction to your whole paper. We have significance, and I talk about that in this week's lecture. And then we have the lit review. And the lit review has different headings like relevant history, what's been done to treat adolescent trauma. Guessing the next one. These are different theories that have been used. What seems to be working, what hasn't worked, what may work from other areas in the field, what hasn't been tried yet that might work. And that's the end of your project 2 weeks from now, the end of the lit review. So you've got a really nice sample to look at. And honestly, you'll have a totally different subject than this. Because I looked at all your subjects. I don't think any were exactly like this. But, use this as a sample. You're going to have all the sections the same as as her paper. But the other thing I wanted to show you, so that's a really nice sample that you can use. But the next thing you can use is research final paper outline. And this is the outline for your final paper. And you are just going to do up until the end of the lit review. Okay. And you can use all of these as headings. It's almost like fill in the blank. So you're going to have your title page, you're going to have an abstract. What's the article about? It's one paragraph. And when you refer to your paper, just pretend you're writing an article, a professional article. That's why we call it an article. Okay. We're going to make this like as professional as possible for you. And so the first section is, well, what's the problem? Okay. And I've got a whole lecture on this. But I'll just go over this briefly. What population do you want to treat? And by that, I mean, when we talk about diversity, it includes so many different things. It could be culture, race, age, sex, location, maybe socioeconomic status. It could be anything. So what population do you want to work with? Do you want to work with adolescents or, uh, whatever it might be, teachers? And then what issue do you want to treat? And what's going on with them? Why do they need help? And if you use the DSM, don't just waste a page and copy the DSM definition or criteria into your paper. Okay. Just briefly, the name of the disorder or diagnosis and a few sentences in your own words is plenty. And so that's identifying the problem. And why is it a significant problem? And there's a whole lecture on quantitative, qualitative, or both. And so the confusing part about this is we use the same language for the significance of the problem, quantitative and qualitative, as types of studies. Quantitative study uses like surveys or things that you can compute statistically based on their answers. and type it into like a statistics program like SPSS. Qualitative is more like interviewing people and transcribing those interviews and asking them in-depth questions in multiple settings. And so whereas you might get 200 or 2,000 surveys or assessments with the quantitative, the qualitative method, you're only going to get very few interviews. But in this case, those are studies. In this case, it uses the same words, but it's really about the significance of the problem. So quantitatively, how many people suffer from this diagnosis or this issue? Qualitatively, how does this issue affect people's lives? Is it really detrimental to their ability to function on a day-to-day basis? And maybe it's both. Maybe a lot of people suffer from this issue and it affects them very seriously on a day-to-day basis. So it could be either one or it could be both, but it's not the type of study you're doing. In this case, quantitative and qualitative refers to the problem, the issue, the diagnosis, how many people are suffering from this diagnosis. And you're going to find all different answers to this. You might find it in other countries. You might find it worldwide, an estimate. But you can just stick to the United States, okay, for this answer. That's the easiest way to do it. Yeah. And that takes us up to the lit review, which I'm going to talk about next. But I want to see if there's any questions on anything I've shared so far. And like I said, I do have an in-depth lecture on each of these things that I've talked about where I go into a lot more detail. All right, so the lit review. I would actually use, and it's only up to here. So I would actually use these as headings for your sections of the lit review. So you're going to have an intro paragraph and you're going to have the history of the issue. And you could write 10 pages just on the history of the issue, but keep it to like 2 paragraphs. And then research questions. We use research questions instead of a hypothesis because a hypothesis works really well with like an experimental study, like in pharmaceuticals or something like that. But for this type of research, when we're dealing with treating individuals with therapy, research questions tend to work better than a hypothesis. So you're just going to answer these questions, what's been done already and what's worked. They might overlap a little. If you need to combine these first two, you can. So you could do it either way. But the main question is what's worked so far. And nothing's works 100%. That's why these populations still need help. So your goal as a therapist is to better meet the needs of these individuals, to better help them as a therapist. So, but you're going to find articles that use different theories to some degree of success, and you're going to write about them. What hasn't worked? That's the toughest question, and you might not find an answer to that. Because a lot of times if something hasn't worked, they're not going to publish it. Me personally, I think if somebody does a study and tries something and it doesn't work, I think that's valuable because somebody else is not going to waste their time trying that same thing. So I think finding out what doesn't work is pretty important too, but that usually doesn't get published, so it's hard to find. The only time it gets published is in what's called a meta-analysis, where they look at everything published and they say, well, some things work better than others. And or they compare two theories in a study, like they'll compare CBT with psychoanalysis, and they'll say one works better than another with a certain issue or something like that. But if you don't find anything for that, don't stress out. Just say you did an extensive literature review or an extensive review of the literature, and nothing was published on what hasn't worked in this area. That's all you have to write if you can't find something for that. I think the most interesting things that I find are what's worked in other areas of the field. And that's like what's worked in other areas of psychology or counseling or social work or something like that for maybe other issues. And the example is that we've talked about is a lot of students are really interested in treating adolescents that are addicted to social media on like their mobile devices. And that's a pretty new field, a um, new issue. And so they're just getting started publishing things on that. And like last semester, most of the articles found were on how to help adolescents with abstinence from using social media. Well, that's not really that therapeutic. That it's just stopping it cold turkey, you know. But so we want to look for more counseling theories and ways they would be applied to this. So if you look at other fields, other issues in the field, online gambling is really close, and there's a lot of theories that you could apply to online gambling. And they've worked with that for a while now. And social media uses the same gimmicks as online gambling programs, the likes, the lights, the responses. They both create dopamine. And so you could research what treats online gambling and apply it to treating addiction to social media. So that's just an example of how you might apply something from a different field. You might have a different issue, but think about what might work from other issues. And one way to do that is to look at symptomology. So if you think maybe somebody suffering from the issue you want to treat, look at the criteria and see if some of that criteria might appear in other diagnoses. There might be treatments in those other diagnoses that you could apply because a lot of the criteria overlap. And what hasn't been done yet? This is where you can get creative. This is where you can say, well, nobody's tried mindfulness or yoga or meditation or mandalas or expressive arts or art therapy to this issue. And I'd like to include that as well. So you're going to write a little bit about that. Why do you think it would work for this issue? How would it be applicable? And you're going to have to cite that. You're going to have to find some journal articles about it, but it won't be applied to your specific issue. It'll talk more in general, or maybe it'll be applied to a similar issue. But I think that's the most creative part. What hasn't been tried yet? Somebody used like equine therapy, like with horses. Um, so you can get creative with that. It might just be something that you're interested in. All right, and you're going to stop at the end of research questions. And then we're going to do the rest of this the rest of the semester. But right now, in 2 weeks, you're only going to go from title page to the end of the lit review. All right. And like I said, I have an entire lecture just on the lit review that you're going to watch. But I just wanted to give you an overview of this and see if you had any questions about the next big assignment. Maybe we should look at the assignment in the syllabus. Just because everybody's going to be asking, well, how long does it have to be? So let's see. That's the big question I get. So there is a rubric and everything else for the lit review assignment. So let's find that. And don't forget, do the plagiarism module and upload your certificate to that Dropbox as well. Okay, lit review. All right. Now, the one thing I do want to say is that, and I've mentioned this before with your references, is that the instructions say your references have to be in the last 5 to 7 years. Only I say it's okay to have a mix. Okay, so you have a few that are recent, but you can go back all the way to Freud, basically, if you want to. I mean, if you're going to apply Freud, you're not going to find much in the last 5 years on that. So there's a lot that you might want to apply, but not much may have been published in the last 5 to 7 years on that theory. So, you know, yeah, have a couple in the last 5 to 7 years, but, you know, you can have a mix. You can go throughout the ages of publishing in psychology and counseling. So they don't all have to be in the 5 to 7 years. All right. So here it says 8 to 10 pages, but I want you to think about that, okay? So let's go with 8 pages, okay? They could be longer than 10 pages. Don't worry about length, but it can't be less than 8 pages. But if it's APA and you have a title page, that's page 1. Abstract, page 2. References is a page. Oh, look at that. It's putting up balloons. All right. References is a 3rd page. So that's 3 pages, just title page, abstract, and references. And you already got references done. So if it's 8 pages, 3 of those pages are title page, abstract, and references. So it's only 5 content pages. So that's really not too bad for a lit review. That's pretty short. All right, so that's the main question. How long does this have to be? But it can be longer. There's no maximum. One of the things is, you know, this is not an English class. So, you know, make sure you get your grammar and spelling checked. Proofread these things. You know, don't just type it and hand it in. Read through it. Use complete sentences. Yeah, so don't use giant fonts. Use 12 pitch. Don't use giant margins. Use 1 inch. Don't use more than double space. Don't use, you know, double point whatever, you know, just double space. So there's lots of ways, you know, oh, it's only 7.5 pages. How do I make this 8? There's only one way, write more. That's it. Don't increase margins, don't increase font, don't change font. You get the idea. All right. Um, and I do go over the rest of this in one of the lectures, but I know that was going to be one of the questions. All right. Questions about the lit review. That's just kind of a basic overview of it. But there are, like I have an entire lecture on just significance of the problem and population. I have another lecture on just the lit review. So we'll go into a lot more detail when you watch those. All right, what are you thinking? It is, but when it comes down to it, you're going to write a 5-page mini paper in 2 weeks. That's not that bad. You can do it. And if you need to write more, go ahead and write more. That's okay.
Yeah, Debbie like had it ready and I'm like, adding pages. It's not.
All right. Julianne, I haven't talked with you very much. How are things going for you? Let's check in with everybody. I'm going to stop recording.